Hello and welcome to Weird Heat. I'm Brian Altano, and this is at Max Scoville.
My Twitter handle. I love Twitter, and I love Instagram, and I love Facebook. I love MySpace. I love DeviantArt.
Yep.
I love Friendster, Zynga.
You know why Max loves all those things? Because this week's episode is all about social media.
Hashtag social media.
Hashtag branding.
Yeah.
Social media is probably how you found this show. So before we get too positive or negative about it, it is our number one way of communicating new ideas to people in this year.
Yeah.
There's really no other way for me to tell you to listen to the show, for me to show you the show, for me to share anything significant that I've made with you as an audience or with Max without getting on social media in some way. We could print flyers and leave them on the floor or put them on cars at the mall.
That would be sort of on brand for this weird, nebulous, unhashtagable show.
Mm-hmm. But to do that, I would probably have to use the internet in some way, and even then, I'd probably have to put some Twitter handles or something.
Yeah, so social media, I don't even know how you define social media at this point. It's effectively any type of anything you're consuming over the internet.
Yeah, that has some level of interaction with other humans.
I think it's a fancy way of saying that you're interacting with strangers over the internet.
Yes,
like it's the, and I mean the media component would be like, is there a picture? Is there text? It's kind of it's content or whatever, but it's not necessarily created. It's also conversation based.
There are a lot of websites that are one-way streets or one-way tickets, right? Like when I go on WholeFoods.com and I order groceries,
sure.
or I go to TurboTax or something. Some of those things even,
thinking like older websites where
Yep.
it was more of like, here is a static thing.
Yeah, and you would consume the information, and then you would leave, and then you would go tell people face to face, or you would share that information through other people with an email. Maybe I would take that website and I'd email it to my dad or something like that. I noticed I did TurboTax a couple years ago, and when it ended, it prompted me to share that I had finished my taxes on social media, which, let's pretend that social media is a finite resource.
Yeah.
That would have been an invaluable usage of it.
So I think it's very easy to look at social media and be like, this is a bad thing.
Yes.
I think it is a bad thing. I think it is a terrible thing. At the same time, I basically use it to do my job. And I also met my future wife through it. Mm-hmm. So like, I don't know. Maybe it's not a bad thing. I grew up on it. I got good at writing because I had a live journal. Like, it's been integral to my development as a human being. And so it's easy to sort of look at like, oh man, this society would be so much better if the president wasn't tweeting at a country that has nuclear weapons.
Yeah,
That's
so for clarity, you and I are in our 30s, and we were part of that last weird group of people that lived before internet, cell phones, microwaves, and pressure cookers, I guess.
Yeah, but it was also, I think we're also young enough that
we were the first to embrace all of those
exactly,
things.
Yeah.
And so generations born after us had those things by nature, and because of that, they became second nature. So for us, we had an interaction. We had a level of interaction with people face to face for a long time that existed before we were funneled into social media. I don't necessarily think that one is inherently better than the other. I'm not going to old man yells at cloud with you. But I just do want to point out that we're part of that last weird dying breed of people that were, born during that window.
Yeah. I think it's growing pains,
yeah,
and it's the fact that it's easy to look back and be like, I mean, you see this with, I don't know, you see this with like those dudes who are like, things used to be better in the 1950s. Look at this painting by Norman Rockwell that shows everything being simple and good. And it's like, that's a very reductive way of looking at anything, because shit's always been fucked up. It used to be actually a lot worse. But I feel like with social media, with just the sheer amount of information we consume, that's the key thing. Is it's information.
It's information.
So social media sounds like a, I don't even know who coined that term.
Right.
I think the idea is that it is the integration of the internet as both an archival kind of information based thing, but also as a communication thing. So it's kind of it's internet 2.0. It's
the thing now where. If we're really going to start breaking it down from different angles, I find it intensely fascinating because if something happens on say there's an earthquake in San Francisco, which happens a couple times a year, mild one, Twitter immediately will be, everyone I follow who lives in San Francisco will be like earthquake or earthquake question mark or earthquake exclamation. And so I'll know that will have happened. I heard gunshots in my neighborhood a couple weeks ago, and on Twitter I typed in gunshots plus my neighborhood, and I had a couple other people who were like gunshots question mark, and then that told me I don't just hear gunshots in my mind.
Right.
So that's good. But I think what we're learning is absolute guinea pigs of all of this, because all of this is so new, is that there is a finite amount of social media that we can actually take in per day before burning out, but also that no one really knows what that is yet, and that even when we do know what that limit is, we still keep looking for it. The way we approach Twitter is the way, and Facebook, and people have studied this, we effectively approach those platforms in the same way that drug addicts approach drugs, which is they consume them and consume them and consume them, and then continue to overconsume them looking for some sort of positive feeling. And sometimes they don't necessarily give them that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there's that obviously everyone has that kind of that hook where you're like, oh, I did the thing. I want to see if I got comments or likes. Like if I had that sort of high score mentality. And it's funny because I feel like we do that on a professional level. You know, like some people just do it for fun, and they're looking for that kind of that little thing. And we're like, if it was professionally acceptable to just like blow lines of coke,
Yes.
like we're like, oh man, like you'll be like, oh, my tweet got retweeted 1,000 times, or whatever, and you check Twitter and like, can I fault you for being on social media when that's actually something that does benefit you professionally? Like,
well,
it's like,
yeah. I mean, so that's the thing. Like, you're in that in between between being like, should I do this? Is this bad for me? Or should I do this? Is this good for me? I have done the thing, and I know you've all done this thing where you look at Facebook, you get bored of it, you close the app on your phone, and then you immediately reopen it. And that's a fucking scary thing to do. When you actually boil down by human nature, what we were doing in that instance, that is basically smoking a cigarette, flicking it in the street, saying, ugh, cigarettes, and then reaching in your pocket and grabbing another one and lighting it. Yep. Now, cigarettes are inherently bad for you, and Facebook isn't really.
It's funny you make that comparison, but I feel like we are with information right now where a lot of stuff was, I don't know, between the turn of the 20th century and maybe the 50s, like there's all those old ads where it's like, the doctors recommend this brand of cigarettes. It smokes like no other. It's like new cork filters to save you those harmful and toxins or whatever. Or like alcohol that was like half morphine and half, or not medicine that was like half alcohol, morphine, and cocaine and just a bunch of shit in there. You're like, oh, how did anyone sign off on that? And then here we are, fast forward, and obviously that's all stuff that we look at and we're like, that's crazy. But look at how we consume information and how we consume like media, and the fact that it is so terrifyingly unregulated. Yeah.
That's scary to me.
Yeah.
To be completely frank, that's scary to me. It's also the fact that, and I generally like to think of this as a kind of positive, uplifting show, and I think I will have a lot of good things to say about social media. I really do. Like we started out the show with, this is how we share ideas now. Some of those ideas that people share are not necessarily the best things that should be shared, but
no.
And I think one of the big issues that I have with it is that back in the day when you had feelings about something, you wrote them down and then you sent them to someone, or you showed them to someone, or you got on a microphone, or you got on a megaphone in the street and you yelled about it. Nowadays, I can go from having a thought to having it ruin my career in half a second.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting to me. It's also, we, with our ideas now, have the ability to cast such wide of a net that we will almost definitely interface with people who are non-appreciative of those ideas, who reject those ideas, who completely believe the opposite of those ideas. And I think we've conflated a lot of that nowadays with things like sensitivity, offense culture, and stuff like that. The reality is we are now putting ideas out to a world that can access them more easily, and we are accessing ideas more easily. I had an argument with a guy on Twitter the other day because IGN tweeted out a quote from Deadpool 2 where Deadpool made a joke about how the X-Men was non-inclusive because it has men in the title, and that's why they came up with the X-Force, which launched in the early 90s and is just a separate supergroup that's basically trying to do a completely different thing than the X-Men are. But he was like, oh, this sucks. Like, because of outrage culture, they're taking men out of the title. And it's like, no, they did that decades ago. Like, this is also, just the name of it. And also that's a comedy.
Yeah.
But
that's a joke. Because Deadpool's like the idea of him being like socially woke is like funny. He's a ninja with swords. Like,
and I thought about, I'm like, why am I arguing with this guy? One, because I'm stupid. I shouldn't stick my head in there.
Yeah.
Two, because it's fun and I'm right.
Yeah.
And three, I can't fault him because all he did was take all of the information that was in this one square and put it there for people to so IGN took a quote and he took it, misinterpreted it, read it as like, oh great, like the Comics Gate, or they're ruining another thing, all these social justice warriors. When the reality is like he's just interacting with something that he wouldn't have seen back in the day unless he opened up a book for it.
The thing about social media is that it is a leap and a bound in terms of. Good God, shut up, dog.
Follow him on Instagram, by the way.
Exactly, he's all Peppers with 2 W's. Peppers, fucking leave it alone. It's he's chasing a fly. I'm sorry, Peppers, get the fuck over here. Come here. Anyway, social media is like nothing's ever been in a vacuum. Social media makes it so like nothing is in a vacuum. Like this is like we talked about how like it. Can you go to watch like Avengers: Infinity War without having seen the other Marvel movies? Does it stand as its own as like as a single package product as a single movie? My dog, everybody. And in reality, like
this will help views.
Exactly. Yeah, dogs are great for social media. But it doesn't matter if you've seen every single Marvel movie. Chances are you've also looked at stuff about it on the internet. Like you've interacted with people about it. Like there's this level of like when a movie comes out, and I mean Deadpool's like a perfect example of this. Like it's full of like references. It's always breaking the fourth wall. Movies are made and they're marketed with the understanding that people are consuming social media the way they are.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it doesn't. Movies weren't made with the internet in mind, and they're changing. I mean, everything's changing with this.
Yeah.
A really good example is that Judd Apatow movie, Funny People.
Yep.
That movie is fine on its own. It's kind of whatever. It's all over the place. That movie as an experiment in like viral marketing and sort of creating this almost like that movie has a cinematic universe on the internet. All these characters, like there were videos of Aziz Ansari's character, I think. He plays in the movie this stand-up comic named Randy. And before the movie came out, they put out clips of him doing stand-up as that character. So when you saw the movie, you're like, oh, he's playing this character. But then if you went online and Googled him, it was as though that was a real comedian. And The same thing with Jonah Hill. He's like, you got to check out my YouTube channel. I like hang out with kittens. It's really funny. And then if you went to that channel, it was actually there.
Right.
And they made like fake advertising campaigns for the movies that Adam Sandler's character was in. And like, if you just watch that movie, it's the tip of the iceberg. The movie itself is fine. But as far as sort of an experiment with like, I guess, transmedia or I mean, social media intersecting with conventional media, it's fucking fascinating. But there's no way to like, I think maybe there's a Blu-ray out there that has all of that stuff on it. But the actual experience of being like, it's almost like if they had like a licensed video game, but it was just the internet.
Yeah. So that's interesting because that was a rapid way to share an idea that was a parody, effectively, and we're seeing that in a much more refined and infinitely more toxic way now with sort of disinformation. And disinformation is spreading as rapidly as information is.
Key thing there. Information, if it's bullshit, is still information.
Yes.
We look at that like when it says something is like all natural on the label, it's like, well, it's all natural what? Because you can still have like all natural ingredients that are terrible for you, or like we say the information age and we're like, information, that stuff that's in the library. Information is not facts. Right.
And so it's so easy to go for somebody to say something and put it out there and all of a sudden thousands of people believe it. That can happen within seconds. And I think it's because we're so used to this platform being something that we trust because we get so much trust from it. The same stream where I get my news is also the same place where Max can share a drawing he made, or one of my friends can be like, I was in a car accident, like, can you help me raise money? And so I conflate all of these things as to be a believable stream, when in reality I have to train my brain to be like, that's bullshit, that's real, that's not bullshit, that's real. You talked about like sort of viral tweets. I think there's a lot of people that they treat social media as a video game, and they swing for the fences, and they try to they get this high score. And you and I are we're in a position where we kind of have a head start, because we have big followings, and we have big networks of people that will help us get a message out or something like that, and we can have something go viral. For the average person, that may happen once or twice in their entire lives, or maybe never, and that's kind of one of their big things, where like they'll be like, I'll see a tweet blow up every now and then, and you click on their profile, and you're like, they have like 65 followers, which I read a joke about that recently. That means that like tens of thousands of people clicked on this guy's profile, and they're like, well, fuck that guy. Yeah.
What I love is when a tweet goes viral, and then there's that window.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people have like the 15 seconds of fame, but they're like, oh, thanks I didn't expect this tweet to go viral. Go check out my
SoundCloud.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm over here. I got an album out.
It's just like, and you're just like, the joke now is people are just like, should probably promote something here.
Yep. I saw one the other day. This guy wrote this really good joke, which is like, it's kind of like, it's not great comedy on Twitter doesn't have to come from a comedy writer. It can just come from anyone. And this guy, he wrote a joke. It blew the fuck up. Had like 65,000 retweets. And his girlfriend was in the replies being like, oh, I guess you're too big for me now, huh? Should we break up? And like, then everybody was like, don't break up with him. He's really funny. And like, now their relationship was magnified and just on blast for everybody. And, she was joking around too, but he was having this moment. And maybe he'll look at that and go like, oh, I loved how that worked. I loved who I was through all of this. I want to keep doing that, which is something I tend to enjoy. But I wanted to point out real quick, I'm
so glad you're pulling this up.
It's effectively fucking meaningless. And let me break this down.
Yeah, so for transparency, clarity, we both are verified on Twitter.
Yeah.
What that means, aside from having a little check mark, is that you get access to a huge bunch of analytics,
of metrics, effectively. Yeah. And so I wrote a tweet the other day about Star Wars, which I do often. It blew up. I didn't think it would. It did 482,000 impressions. And that means that's people who saw it, which is like how many people drove down a highway past a sign. That's an impression.
That is drove past, correct.
Yeah. Not necessarily read.
People didn't. Yeah, they didn't necessarily even see it. It was. That's how many screens it was on.
Yeah. So even when you see a video on Facebook that has 500,000 views, that doesn't mean 500,000 people press start or hit play, watch it in its entirety, watch the ad before it, in the middle of it sometimes, and afterwards, and then we're like, a video I have seen. It just means they're scrolling and they saw it. So that's that. That's your big number, big pie in the sky number, huge, right? From there, let's just decimate that number. Total engagements, 16,000. So a fraction of the previous number. That's interacted with the tweet in some capacity. That means retweeted, clicked on my profile, favorited, maybe copied and shared with a friend or whatever like that. Let's go to retweets now. 1,662 people. Not a lot. So 500,000 people were like, that's a tweet. 2,000 people were like, good enough to show other people.
Yeah.
So that's nothing.
Then that's also where the bulk of the impressions come from.
Yep. Now from there, 1,623 people clicked through my profile to be like, who the fuck is this guy? 1,623 people. 510 people replied. Half of those were like, that's good. The other half were like, fuck you. 4 people followed me because of that tweet. So if you think that you can build an audience by writing interesting jokes or funny things or anything like smart things, and that 500,000 people will see the tweet, and then from there you'll get hundreds of thousands of new followers. No, you'll get 4. And you know what? Of those 4, I don't know how many of them were spam bots. I don't know how many of them saw my next tweet and were like, not as good as the last one.
Yeah, it doesn't show you the unfollows.
And they bailed.
Yeah.
So 4 people. So 1 out of every 100,000 people who viewed that tweet was like, I'll give this guy a shot.
So other thing to think about, this is, I think of our jobs as being sort of bullshit, but we do have a very interesting perspective working at IGN because we're privy to like huge numbers and I mean the metrics and the data and like where stuff comes from, where it's going. One of the huge problems we have at IGN is how to reach an audience when the audience is on a billion different platforms. Mm-hmm. How do you create media that resonates with, like, if you make something that makes, it's a brilliant article, works perfectly as an article. If you click on it on the website, you read the article, you're like, this is perfect. This is what everybody wants. It does really well on the website. If you take that and you put it on Instagram, I don't know, you make a text post or a screenshot or whatever, it's not going to perform the same because it's not made for that format.
Yeah.
If you turn it into a video, it might bomb. If you put it on Snapchat, it might do better than it did on the website because a different audience is using Snapchat compared to a website.
Do you guys like the music that I'm making for the show? I'm really proud of it. It's impossible for me to convey that to you because sharing music on social media is next to impossible.
The fact that we're Trojan horsing music through a podcast is that makes sense. People consume podcasts and music completely differently, and podcasts is another thing entirely. Like if something that was incredibly well written might completely flop as a podcast, and vice versa. There's so many podcasts out there that do incredibly well, like they do better numbers than videos do because you only have to use your ears to consume it.
Yep.
It's something that I think also it's weird because we don't really listen to a lot of podcasts.
No.
We make a lot of them.
We make a lot, yeah.
But as far as like understanding sort of the use case, like how it's consumed, it's totally alien. And you can have all of the fucking data and metrics in the world to understand like who's consuming it, how many people are consuming it, where it's consuming. But there's still like an X factor of just, but why?
Yeah, because everything has to still funnel into its its sort of compartmentalized box.
Yeah,
I bought a new car and I was driving here yesterday and I got a text from you and it didn't show me the text on the screen because that could kill me. It read me the text. And
I'm absolutely going to abuse that.
Yeah, and I used my voice to respond to that text. But the idea of that having my car read me tweets would make me want to kill myself.
Oh, that'd be terrible.
And it's the same thing on my TV. I don't have social media on my TV. I have a PlayStation which has the podcast Beyond community that pops up and some other things, and there's Twitter integrations and some of those things, but I don't read tweets on my TV. I don't check Facebook on my TV. I keep all those things separate.
Yeah.
My phone funnels all of that stuff.
Somebody out there does.
Yeah.
And that's the weird thing is social media is everywhere. And the fact that it is sort of this like million-headed hydra of all these different tendrils going every which way. And making this show, we have a huge problem with that because like before we made the show, before we even figured out how the fuck you explain the show, which we still haven't really nailed down, we were like, we need to cover all of our bases and make sure Weird Heat is on every possible platform, which is exactly the same problem we run into at IGN, where we're like, okay, well, who's consuming it where and why and how, as opposed to just being like, hey, we have a great new podcast. It is on iTunes, period. We're like, no, we've got to be on. I think we're still figuring out how to get on Spotify. Like, there's so many different ways every which way, and every one of those services will give you different numbers because obviously everyone performs differently, but they also have different ways of tracking stuff.
Yes,
and end of the day, social media is it's not real.
Yeah, I'm actually...
It's all ephemeral. It's all data. It's all just numbers flying around out there.
To be honest, I'm occasionally kind of intensely jealous of people who use social media as a one-way street because they just go to Twitter, they find 100 people that they like, they sign up to read their tweets, and they never interact with them. On the flip side, there are people who specifically use social media as a way to vent, and I think that's okay too, but there's a lot of people that just use it as they follow a bunch of brands or a bunch of companies or something like that, and they are constantly interfacing with those brands or people or whatever in an outwardly negative way. And I think it was like we were talking about before about how back in the day when people had a bad feeling about something or didn't like something, they'd write a letter. The act of them writing that letter got it out of their system, their catharsis, and then either they would mail it or they would throw it in the trash and they'd feel like I'm done. But now, when you see something you don't like, and we've all been there, I've had the gut reaction to do this too. You're watching a movie, you're watching something on TV, or you're hearing something, you grab your phone, you go to type something, you angry, because your gut reaction is sort of to get out this negative feeling you have inside you. Because inherently, everything should work and should be good. And so that's the basis, neutral understanding of the universe. But occasionally, things don't go your way, and your gut reaction is to get mad at them. It's why when you look at reviews of things on Amazon, the most telling ones are the most negative ones, because those are the ones that people really wrote with some fury. Same with Yelp reviews. A lot of people don't have a great experience at a restaurant and walk out and say anything. They just assume it's supposed to go that way. But when it goes bad, they'll let you know. So a lot of people use social media to create this version of themselves that's sort of like a hyper toxic version of themselves, where they only let people know that they don't like something. I notice it a lot as a Star Wars fan, as I'm sure you do too. There are a lot of people on social media who specifically exist to boycott Star Wars. They are not creating an entity to tell people to watch something. They're telling people to not enjoy something. And I think if you're trying to stop human trafficking, then yes, there's a good way to sort of say, like, I don't want to fight. I want to fight against this thing. It's inherently bad.
It's like fictional activism, sort of.
Yes. Yeah.
It's also it's weird that there's a huge culture and a huge following of people who consume criticism of stuff almost more passionately than they consume the stuff itself.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at I don't know, like people like Jim Sterling, like Total Biscuit, like these critics who have these massive followings who they don't like. I'm not. It would be. I mean, it would be hypocritical and reductive to say that those people don't create something. But it's interesting to me that there's like a more impassioned. It's almost like they're like. I mean, they're sort of professional fans. We're this too. This is our job. This is what we do. But it's odd to me that there are people out there who are more inclined to like they're more inclined to watch a Let's Play or a streamer than they are to actually go play the game. And that's culture. That's a direction that things are going, and I don't know what that means.
Well, yeah, because I don't think there's nothing inherently wrong with that, right? But I think that like if your platform through your public-facing platform through the internet is specifically to deconstruct things, to negate things, to basically tell people to not enjoy something, there's something to be said about what that character is. Because I think that at the end of it all, when your life is over, people kind of look at who that person is. And I don't know how many famous people in history have been remembered for hating shit.
I mean, look at how many famous critics there are versus like famous directors or painters or chefs or whatever. It's odd. I don't really know how to make sense of it. I don't know if it's like a flash in the pan thing. I remember saying, I don't know, a few years ago, this was stupid. This was probably 5-6 years ago. No, longer than that. That Let's Play culture, or like Let's Plays as a form of like, this is when like Machinima was huge and like everyone just was like playing games and talking over it or whatever. That was going to go away, or that was going to decline when the generation that was really into it went to college and suddenly had less time to consume that stuff. I couldn't have been more wrong.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, is that it's not like a generation has a hard stop. It's everything is a gradient, Everything's on a spectrum, and the generation that went away to college and has less time to consume stuff, now maybe they just follow people on Twitter. They follow them on Instagram. They look at, short clips, Snapchat, whatever, or they just tune into Twitch whenever they get the chance.
Right.
And that's the thing that followed it up, was everybody streaming everything.
You were talking about critics. Roger Ebert's obviously the most famous critic of our generation, or probably of the last 100 years of anything.
Who came before that?
Right. Which Roger Ebert review do you think of when you think of Roger Ebert reviewing something? You probably think of one of the negative ones. I think of like Brown Bunny, where he went back and forth with the director of that movie and tore it apart. I think about the movies that he outright hated, because those are the ones that got shared the most through social media for the last few years. Because reading 6 paragraphs of love about something just doesn't feel right.
Do you like any of his movies?
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't even name anything he worked on. I know he did work on.
He made a bunch of movies. Yeah. That's the weirdest part of it, is that, like, I don't know, people do who are critical go on to create stuff. But with social media, kind of going back to sort of the main topic here, I wonder how much of sort of everything wrong with social media is people not understanding how to use it correctly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is a reflection of the people using it. So there is no correctly. There's no way to be like, oh, no one's following the instructions. I get like livid when people put like text posts as screenshots on Instagram, because Instagram is an app for like, you ever heard the expression like a picture's worth 1,000 words? And maybe that would like break through that whole character limit you're dealing with, but instead people are like, here's a fucked up blurry ass like JPEG that's been shared 1 million times and artifacted. I don't know where that mentality comes from, but obviously people will find different uses for stuff. I've absolutely used a screwdriver to hammer a nail in before.
Yeah.
And that's that monkey brain shit. But we're interesting because we've always sort of worked on the internet. You built a website, a decade ago.
Yeah, that's how I got my job.
You
out here,
learned how the internet works from a creative standpoint, and you made stuff on it. We're making stuff on it. That's what we're doing here. But that's sort of, standing on the shoulders of giants, that we are putting this out on platforms that exist because they were created by other people. There are a lot of people out there who help create this infrastructure and use it. And there's a lot of people who also go to the store and they get one of these and they turn it on. And then what?
Yeah.
Like for a lot of people, their first exposure to the internet or to social media is through a phone, which is a completely different user experience than like sitting down with a mouse and keyboard in the school library and being like, I'm going on the World Wide Web. And I think I don't know if they teach internet classes in school anymore.
Yeah.
And if they do, I guarantee you it's behind.
Well, yeah. And that, because I think the number one thing that should be taught is something you alluded to earlier. There's a permanence here now. And the internet is this like vast sort of clashing of immediacy and permanence.
But at the same time, it's also like if you've tried to find somebody who deleted their Facebook, it takes work.
It takes work. Yeah.
It's also how many people just straight up don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
I think our generation specifically, and I mean us as people, I know, some people are just like they have a particular set of skills. Mm-hmm. Like there's this, I mean, I always think of that, like that transition from silent film into talkies, and how a bunch of silent film stars like just didn't work. Like they didn't know how to act with their voice.
Yep.
Like they weren't good at it. And I think there's a similar thing that happens not just with people who work on the internet, but people who use the internet, where there is a different way of processing information when you bridge that gap between analog and sort of information age.
Completely. I think where I get worried is that a thing that you said in this furious, impassioned moment when you were 16 is tethered to your character forever, unless you go in and manually delete it. And like we have this tendency to be vulnerable or honest or toxic or heartfelt or compassionate about something, and that stays in our sort of personal lineage forever. Whereas you might have said something in high school that you regret saying now, and that will haunt you personally. I mean, I can't find it.
There's also stuff that I put on the internet that I deleted. I don't know if I deleted it. I didn't, like, it wasn't a website that I built myself. And even then, if you build a website, you put it out there, who's to say it's not cached somewhere, that some site didn't come in and grab it and exists in like the Wayback Machine. Like scrubbing your own sort of digital footprints is kind of a fool's errand at this point. Like I don't think, and at the same time, it's also like I remember when I was probably in my 20s and I was posting stupid drunk photos on Facebook, and like, and I had a friend who was older be like, "Hey, you gotta quit it with that. That's incriminating, and it's going to stop you from getting jobs."
Yep.
And fast forward, suddenly I have a job where my job is to just put out more of that. It's just more and more of incriminating stuff and stupid shit I say on the internet constantly. So that idea of like, I don't know, it's like a credit report almost. Mm-hmm. It's like having a credit score. Like you can't, I grew up thinking that credit cards were bad and it's a fast way to get in debt really, really badly. But at the same time, if you try to apply for a loan or anything and you don't have a credit score, they're like, who the fuck are you? Get out of here.
Right.
You're suspicious because you don't have any footprint.
Right.
Having a little bit of like a bad-ish credit is probably preferable to having no credit. Mm-hmm. And that's bizarre. And I think that like social media is something we still don't know how to make sense of. And we don't know how to parse anything. Like we don't know how to look at it and be like, what does this mean? And everything moves so quickly we don't process it right.
Well, we haven't had a chance to stop and sort of assess what effects this has had on our species yet.
No.
Because it started. It ramped up.
Yeah.
We're in it. And now the idea of pulling away from it is impossible. When was the last time you tried to like delete social media or step away, take a break from social media? How long did you go?
Yeah.
I mean, it's effectively an addiction. And now on top of that, there is that weird scary notion that a lot of people, and we've all been guilty of it, are using it as an effective placebo to satiate the lack of actual meaningful social interactions they're having face to face.
Relationships are so fucked right now. Like, I mean, interpersonal ones. If you stopped being someone's friend it sometimes just happened organically. Like if you got up and moved and you didn't give that person your phone number, that was it. You didn't keep that person with you. Now I'm still in touch with people from high school who I haven't spoken to in over a decade. They're just there.
Yeah,
if I wanted to reach out and be like, hey, Joe, we haven't talked since literally senior year PE, but let's talk about nachos that we used to talk. Like stupid, weird, small talk interactions that don't mean anything are
people you met at a party once that you were tagged in a photo with, who added you as a friend. You now have to read the kind of stuff they say forever. You can mute them. We have this weird notion now where on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram, you can follow somebody and then mute them, and then not have to read them anymore, but they still think that you're still connected through social media in some way, which is like you saying fuck you to them, but them still thinking that they're, unless they muted you, like we're in this weird thing where we don't want to ever disconnect from anyone.
No.
Because moving away, like cutting the cord with people is fucking, it's this brash thing now.
I like to look at sort of social media and stuff that we have on there and compare it to sort of what it was based on, like what the almost like the whether it's infrastructure or the invention itself. Like, I mean, telephones are a kind of interesting analog.
Yeah.
The idea of like, we use our phones to stay in touch with people, communicate with people. I'm sorry to keep touching your phone.
It's fine.
It's a very personal thing.
It's a touchable phone.
It's like grabbing your dick. But like I don't know, all your secrets are on there. It's full of your life.
There's no secrets. Not
lots of secrets in your dick. But no, like, that's the thing is if you look at what telephones used to be, there were an appliance you had in your home that was connected to a wire that went elsewhere.
We had one growing up. We had one in the house, and it was in one room, and you had to go into that room.
Yeah,
I mean, which is what they experimented with on the Jersey Shore. They had that shitty duck phone that they all made them go hide in the corner on.
What the hell? But like, imagine if conventional telephones function the way social media did, and that anytime you talk to anybody, they were on your phone. You know, like if you picked up your phone and you heard people you went to high school with having a conversation. I mean, that's effectively how it is. You go on Facebook and people you're not actually engaging with are having conversations there without you. Like they're posting stuff and they're communicating with you. And there's this sort of this constant stream. It's like if you picked up your phone and it was a party line already, that's effectively what it is.
Well, there's also the idea that we have to be careful who we interact with or who we sort of broadcast, because we're effectively endorsing other people through our social media. And that gets weird too, because it's like if I see a funny joke on Twitter and I retweet it, but then that guy's like a white nationalist.
Yeah.
Then like I didn't do my research or something like that, and I have a bunch of people being like, "Oh, what, you just basically retweeted this guy who has like these toxic ideas and all this other bad stuff happened." And so like now all of a sudden I become basically guilty of helping that person signal boost whatever he was saying.
So, this is Zoe Quinn's book, Crash Override. This is sort of the story about how Gamergate came around. Whether you love or hate Zoe, this is a really interesting book about the internet. Gamergate's a weird thing. I kind of hate saying it because it's sort of like, I don't know, it's like Beetlejuice. You say it 3 times and somebody fucking shows up and starts giving you a hard time. So prove me wrong. But she talks about sort of the internet as a piece of infrastructure and the fact that it should be treated like real life. And there's a generation of old people. A lot of old people don't understand what it is, and they don't understand that it's like it is necessary for a lot of people to do their jobs, and it is integrated into everything, and that personal information that exists attached to your bank or to the police, like if look at swatting, like the fact that you can go on the fucking internet and find out where someone lives, and if they piss you off in Call of Duty, you can send actual soldiers to their house.
Yeah, and they might shoot them or something.
Exactly. Yeah, that's terrifying. But at the same time, there are people out there who are like, no, it's the internet. It's nerds go on there to argue about Star Trek, which was true in like 1993. It wasn't as big of a deal back then, but gradually it's integrated into everything. And I think that's what's really tricky is like it's incredibly fast moving and it's sort of everywhere all at once, but it's not like it's intertwined with everything.
Yeah.
Like it's not like the invention of something new. It's like if they invented flying cars and we're all up there flying around in flying cars and crashing into each other, that wouldn't really fuck with the roads down here. It would change them sort of as a side effect, but the internet is sort of like it was called the information superhighway, which is kind of what it is, except everybody got on it without a license.
Right. Well, there was like, and you told me, you've talked to me about this book before, and you said one of the most like kind of telling and fascinating things about it is that when she went to the police, being like, all these people are trying to ruin my life, they were kind of just like, well, it's the internet. Like, what can we do? Because it's not a place to them. It's a sort of nebulous concept. There's that Tyler the Creator tweet, and like I like him as a rapper, but he tweeted like, what the fuck is cyberbullying? Just like turn off your computer.
Yeah,
and because it like to him it wasn't something that it's something that was fake, like this hologram that just exists and projects in one place, when really it's something that it carries into your real life. And it's really easy. I feel like we've been kind of inherently negative on the concept of it. There's, we've talked about at the top of the show, there's a lot of really positive things that come from it. When I saw recently, and I was telling you about this when we went to get coffee the other day, this guy harassed Sarah Silverman, and Sarah Silverman was kind of just like, who's a comedian, and she was like, what's your problem, man? Like, are you okay? Like, you're just in a really bad mood. And I think he said something along the lines of, like, I just, I'm really pissed off because of this, and this. And she was like, yeah, but what's like really getting to you? And he said, like, I need money for like this surgery. And she said, well, let's help you get money for that surgery. And she did. And she signal boosted this guy's like GoFundMe or whatever it was. And he was able to get what he needed. And I don't think he'll ever be negative to her again. I mean, if he is, then like, what the fuck? But she used that platform, not even to school him, which I think is what inherently we get combative and we want to battle people there, right? And I'm definitely guilty of that. But she used it as a way to be like, I can throw 100,000 Pikmin at this thing and they will lift this thing up and bring it to the finish line. And so this guy needs help, and I can be there for him. On the same page, you see a lot of stuff now. It's this beautiful trend I've seen on the internet where someone will be like, hey, I'm a freelance illustrator and I'm just trying to do this. Or like, hey, like I'm a personal trainer, or like I make like really cool decorative birthday cakes, like, and any retweet helps. And you look at the counter on the bottom, and tens and hundreds of thousands of people retweeted. As I told you earlier, maybe only 4 people followed that guy afterwards, but maybe 10 of them hired him. There's a guy named Super Video Game Land who I try to tweet about every now and then because he does really cool paintings based on retro video games. And I forget that, as somebody with 100,000 Twitter followers, using my power to signal boost somebody like that every now and then can get him enough work to maybe, buy his family a couple dinners and take his kids out and like go on vacation or something like that. And so there's something really good there.
We have to find it though.
Yeah, we have to find it. And we have to be better at utilizing it for that. There's a lot, you and I make this reference a lot of the internet is a lot of people who are kind of just like, oh, this tastes disgusting. Try it. And you're kind of like, I hate this thing. I saw you kind of schooling somebody the other day, and you're like, don't signal boost shitheads. Like it's so easy to do that because I think our gut reaction is to basically use mob mentality and this sort of like crowd-sourced lynching where we get a bunch of people in to jump on somebody. But
we keep hitting on things that are people. When people say something's the Wild West.
Yeah,
I think that is more of an appropriate term than we should give it credit for. I think if you say Wild West, people are like, oh, anything goes.
Yep.
Period. But no, in reality, like the Wild West was like, it was a time of opportunity. It was a time of also like lawlessness. Obviously, there's not a lot of structure in place, but at the same time, because it is a frontier, there's a certain camaraderie that comes with it. And back in the day, like if you were, I don't know, traveling across the fucking middle of nowhere and you came across people who were like, hi, are you going to kill me? No, you're not. Do you want stew? We can have stew together. Like that idea of like of being able to kind of team up with somebody or to be decent to each other. And at the same time, there's also people who are like, who will rob you blind, and people who will, cut your fucking head off or whatever. Or maybe if you prove to be one of those people, you get lynched.
Yeah.
You get a mob gets together and they're like, he stole our sheep. We've got to kill him,
And that's, we are learning on the fly to develop a sort of measured compassion for all of those scenarios too, right? Isn't that crazy? Or it's just sort of like, well, there's this guy, he might kill me, but like, why does he want to kill me? Or like, there's this guy, he needs stew. Yeah. Why does he need stew?
No, I mean, in Zoe's book, she's got a wonderful thing that sort of just praises the internet and talks about growing up with it. And like, I think a lot of people expected her to be like, here's Gamergate's the worst. Here's what it is. But the book is actually like, it's very much of a memoir. And it talks about how like, you know, she grew up in this small town in the middle of fucking nowhere, and some of her first friends were on the internet. And that resonated a lot with me because I had a hard time fitting in at school, and I wound up like making a bunch of friends on LiveJournal, and like that was my crew. Like, there are people I'm still in touch with who I was close with through writing on the internet. And it's weird because at that point in time, the internet was this kind of odd little shady back corner thing.
Yeah.
I remember I didn't have a cell phone in high school like a lot of kids did. But trying to get a girl's AIM screen name, to be like, hey, can we talk on AIM after school? And sometimes they'd be like, what the fuck is that, you nerd? Mm-hmm. Other times they'd be like, I have MSN. And I'd be like, shit, I got to download that on my 56K connection, you know? And then gradually that became like more socially acceptable. And suddenly there was MySpace. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, then it was still awkward to be like, are you on MySpace? You know, and there were girls that I would have a class with and I'd add them on MySpace and we'd start talking on there. Or they'd be like, hey, you're actually really funny. And I'm like, I'm actually really funny on MySpace. I'm terrified in real life, you know? And like, I don't know, then it was like, I don't know, I'd meet girls and it's a gradual kind of creeping normalcy of what the internet was. And then Facebook came along and suddenly it was like, everybody was on Facebook. It was normal to have the internet. It was acceptable socially to communicate with people over the internet. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly it's everywhere. And I don't think that's in over the course of, that was 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
that was a decade. That's nothing. That's such a short period of time.
Back in the day when you made a friend, you were basically like, oh, let me get your number. Or you'd be like, where do you live? I'm going to come be your friend at your house.
That's like if you went from a fucking Model T to a Lamborghini in 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
Things shouldn't evolve that fast, but they do, and they are. So like, it's important that we pay attention to it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not young and single anymore, so I don't know how this works. But like, I was on a shoot recently, and instead of somebody being like, "What's your number?" they were like, "Oh, what's your Twitter?" Or they were like, "What's your Instagram?" You know, I'll follow you on Instagram, and I followed them back. But then doing that, like back in the day when you got somebody's phone number, your interaction with them as a person depended on how you personally interacted with them. So like if I got your number back in the day, I'd text you, hey Max, how's it going? Hey Brian, good to talk to you. Bye. Nowadays, if I follow you on social media, I am exposed to every single thought that you decide to publicly display in any capacity. So instead of it being like this short thing, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm going to follow Max on Twitter. Holy shit, Max has tweeted 250 million times.
Yeah.
You know, you haven't, but I'm just saying.
He posts pictures of his asshole. Like, I retweeted this thing the day. It was something for like a video game, and I was like, oh, this is great. And then I had a bunch of people who were like, yo, don't scroll through that guy's tweet. And I like unretweeted it because it was like a bunch of like fucking really hardcore hentai, and I was like, I probably shouldn't be directing people towards that. I don't know. It's just we're not even fucking mentally equipped to process exactly how huge of a development social media is.
Yes.
It's also it's funny that we talk about like countries. Like we talk about oh America, this is important. We do this here. Oh, then Canada's this other country and they do things differently. We are so far past countries as a boundary. Yeah. Like the fact that it's sort of like, I don't know, remember like growing up and you're like, oh, like maybe like, I don't know, your mom didn't let you play with toy guns or whatever. And then you go over to a friend's house and they've got like shitload of toy guns. And you're like, oh fuck, that's awesome. And then you come home and you're like, hey, how come I can't have that? They have that over there.
Well, when you were a kid, you had, you turn on the TV at designated hours of the day, or you'd go to a designated news channel and you would get news from local news, you'd get countrywide or state news, and you'd get news from the whole world.
Right, but I mean, on just a sociological level, like we're the internet allows us to go to friends' houses.
Yeah,
we're like, hey, they have healthcare, they have maternity leave, they have like what are we doing differently? I mean, meanwhile, on the flip side, you're also like, hey, they have death camps and famine over there. We should probably do something. And like, that's not like. Jet lag is a physical symptom of something where technology allows us to move too fast. Like we are not biologically equipped to get on an airplane and fly 6,000 miles in the course of like 10 hours or whatever.
Or 10 seconds. Like that's the fucked up thing now, is that I can show you 4 tweets in a row that your brain will read in 10 seconds before bed. And it will be, I make birthday cakes. Can you please signal boost them? I was in a car accident. I need money. I hate Star Wars. You should boycott it. 70 people were killed in a bombing. You read all of those in 4 seconds, and then you hover over each one. And you're like, oh, well, I want to help the birthday cake guy, and I don't know what to do with the other things. I disagree with the Star Wars guy. I'm going to reply to him because the other ones are a lot to take in, and I don't know how to help. You feel helpless. You feel inundated with information. You're also now exposed to so much more that you never would have seen back in the day, like lava videos of Hawaii. Like I got to watch all those. I would have had to tune in for those things back in the day.
Yeah, and it's like on the one hand, it sort of ignorance is bliss, and it's great that we're able to like see these things that are far away. But we have this like short attention span because it happens so frequently, and I think as sort of a defense mechanism, either we have crushing anxiety or just apathy
or desensitization. Effectively.
It's fucking bizarre. We could do an entire fucking podcast a series about social media. Because it's constantly changing. There's always something to talk about. If you're looking for a good podcast about the internet, I recommend Reply All. That's a fun one about sort of how everyone's using the internet and how it's all fucked up and crazy. But yeah, like I don't know. We should probably come back to this, talk about it another time.
There's plenty more to unpack here.
Yeah.
But yeah, seriously, thank you for using social media to find this episode, because that's how we got it to you, and that's how we'll continue to get it to you. I wanted to say real quick, I've said this before a bunch of times. I know you're in the same boat. I kind of hate self-promotion. I don't hate the idea of self-promotion when others do it. I personally have a hard time saying, I know there's a lot out there, but what about this guy?
Yeah.
What about me? What about what he's working on?
No, it feels like begging, which is weird. So head to patreon.com/weirdheat. No, but really like,
when you see us do that, just know that the little part of us struggled. That it's not, there's some people who make it look really easy. I have a hard time doing that. So if you interface with any tweet I've ever written, or you've clicked on one of the things I've said and it's led you to one of the shows that I work on, thank you.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah. And I mean, if you've ever had anxiety, going up and saying the right thing, that time you don't know how to text the thing right. Imagine if you were texting it to 70,000 people at once. It's not normal. It's not a normal thing to do, and we shouldn't do it. But yeah,
hey, Madison Square Garden, check out my new song.
Here, let me text 70,000 people. Oh fuck, there's a typo. 70,000, and I mean, that's being generous. A lot of those are probably Russian spam bots.
Well, yeah, and only 4 of them will actually follow you.
Exactly.
Afterwards.
Yeah. No. So anyway, if anything we said in this rambly 52 minutes resonated with you about how you use the internet, please just think about how you consume it, how you use it. Try not to be an asshole. Try to be one of those good cowboys in that Wild West. And thank fuck we don't have flying cars, because we'd all be dead by now.
Yeah. Because especially when we have that, and then we'll be able to read your tweets on them and just crash into a building. It's not going to. Great.
You can tell us how wrong we are on Twitter. I'm Max Scoville. He's Agent Bizzle. We also have a Facebook group. It's facebook.com/group/weirdheat. Go jump in there. It's still small enough that it hasn't completely turned into a festering clusterfuck of a hellhole. So go. I think around 10,000 people, groups just fall apart.
Yeah.
I think that is a sociological thing.
One of the things I wanted to throw in there too is that I've learned that with every single tweet I write now, there's at least like 2 or 3 dudes that have to get blocked. Like, and you could write anything. You could be like, I really love the smell of flowers. And then a bunch of people will call me a word that rhymes with daggett, and then I'll have to block them.
The angriest of the angry beavers. Fuck.
Our camera's gotten blurry again.
I'm like, so. I don't know what that is. That's kind of, I don't know. That's sort of on brand though.
It's falling asleep.
Anyway, go to like, share, subscribe on YouTube. Fun fact, calls to action work because people are animals, and telling someone to go do something makes them more likely to do it than not, which is really fucking weird.
Yeah.
So when I don't know, when you go to TurboTax and you get your taxes done and they say, hey, share this, somebody did.
Yeah.
Somebody's like, well, TurboTax said to, I might as well.
A lot of people do that. They're like, I did the taxes.
Yeah. I mean, those banner ads that just said, click here. That fucking worked. People clicked there. That's terrible. We're all awful, and we should be ashamed of ourselves, but we should also use social media for good.
Yeah.
Good Lord, we've dug ourselves a big pit as a society. Have a good one.
Take a spin, now you're in with the techno set. You're going surfing on the internet.
Welcome.
Okay guys, the first thing that you need to know is that the internet is amazing and it's changing every day. Once you've learned how to get online yourselves, you'll start seeing web pages everywhere. TV shows have them, schools, Disney World, even the White House.
What's a web page? Something ducks walk on?
Ha ha, very funny. No, it's the name of the different sites you can look up on the internet.
When we installed internet access on our computer, I got the whole family involved.
It's true, everybody had their own tasks to do.
It was a lot of work, but it was really worth it.
Now that I've gotten on the internet, I'd rather be on my computer than doing just about anything. Now that I've gotten on the internet, I'd rather be on my computer than doing just about anything.